here's our speaker, Mike Callis, who's speaking for Illinois Normal. Is he normal? Well, all right.
Are we?
Well, nah. Anyway, the new normal. Anyway, we begin tonight with the announcements. The first announcement, of course, is that we have rules here. The first rule is one fool at a time. The rest of us keep quiet. Usually the fool's the fool with a microphone, but sometimes you're asking questions. You pay me the $3 tuition, I'll let you ask questions. The moderator, that's me, Brom Bastard, will recognize speakers so that we do have only one fool speaking at a time. And that means that we are more likely to understand what's going on. Okay, announcements. Gene Hortner, I know you have a couple of announcements.
The Jane Addams Senior Caucus Healthcare Committee meets Monday at 1 o'clock at our office at 1111 North Wells. We're going to plan an action to make sure that Social Security is around for many years to come. And that's the first announcement. The second announcement is the campaign. We're having a Scrap the Cap campaign to make sure that Social Security is around for you young folks who are under 70 years of age. Because the way it is now, the funding could run out as soon as 2020. We don't want that to happen. If you're a youthful 70, 2020, you'll be a youthful 77. So we want to make sure that's around for all you young folks. The Scrap the Cap campaign means we're going to take the cap off. The payroll tax is now capped at $113,000 a year. You take that cap off and tax all earned income. It should be secured till about 2080. So the way we're doing that is having a campaign. We're getting bottle caps, and if you bought bottle caps, you can give them to me tonight or maybe to Brom. And we're having you sign cards. Well, you sign the cards and put your name on one side and sign the cards saying why Social Security is important to you. Give them to me or Brom and we'll take them in. We're going to send these postcards and these bottle caps to our legislators. So anyway, you can pick them up at the front here. And if you gave us stuff in the past, thank you for your participation.
Right. Thank you. Any more announcements? Who will have announcements? Tim Bolger.
Just to let you know that tonight's presentation will be videotaped for eventual distribution to the internet. And I guess tonight we're going to be talking about legalization of smoking products, or maybe hemp. But oh, never mind, I forgot. It's a ban on smoking in the restaurant.
Industrial hemp.
Industrial hemp. Well, tobacco is also an industrial product. Like I said, we'll be taped tonight for eventual distribution to the internet. Look at the College of Complex's homepage, click on the link to videos, and you'll be able to see it tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Any other announcements? Charlie Paydock.
How you gonna grow marijuana if you're stoned all day?
Oh. All right, I guess I shouldn't rebuttal before the program. Let's see. I don't have a flyer on this, but if you're interested, the monthly state board meeting of the Independent Voters of Illinois will be on Wednesday at 6:30 at 1325 South Wabash. Even though you will not be able to vote on any of the issues that might come up, you're certainly welcome to attend. It doesn't matter whether you're a member or not. Let's see, if you came here as public transportation as I did, instead of gas-guzzling SUV, there'll be a meeting on March 4th of CTA Citizens Taking Action, and I put 2 informative brochures up here, one of which the CTA has sold the transit payment system to a private company. We're yelling about we have this organization, Privatization Watch, meaning each and every time someone uses the CTA bus or goes in a station, a fraction of that transaction goes to a private company so that they have a steady revenue stream without putting a bus or vehicle on the street. And this is the dangers I've been telling you folks about privatization and PPPs, private-public partnerships. Nevertheless, we're kicking up sand about that. It's been on the news, and we've been invited by that CBS woman to speak on this issue, Tucker. Let's see, and another issue, and this one is even more pressing. I was at the public hearing yesterday. The state of Illinois is considering allowing passengers to bring weapons on a CTA bus, which quite frankly is totally friggin' nuts. I'm gonna get on the Alston Street bus at midnight with these yahoos, and they're gonna have weapons? Are you for real? But I mean, honestly, but you can go on to that. I took out 100 NRA types yesterday. But I emerged victorious. Let's see. Although I'm not a capitalist, I will give an advertisement for next week's program. Somebody right from the area, Diane Shapiro, will tell us about the UN Agenda 21. So you can read about it here. We filled out the schedule all the way through June, and we've even just the other day added someone who's been there, and they're going to talk about the Arab Spring, which should be a very interesting program. Anyhow, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. More announcements?
What about human nature?
I have one for this Monday night. Black masses as vanguard is the topic of the Marxist humanists at News and Letters. They're celebrating the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, and they've reissued Black Masses as Vanguard, a publication they put out some years ago, and their thesis is that without the Black masses in this country, you wouldn't have the First International or a real liberation movement in this world. So, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Mike Callums. Here he is, our speaker.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm Mike Callis. I'm with Illinois NORML, that is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Law. And usually when we say we're here to reform marijuana law, people think that they're coming to a big smoke out. So for those of you today that you're here for the smoke out, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this isn't that event today. We're actually going to be talking about industrial hemp. It's actually a pretty serious issue that kind of got a bad rap over the years. And too often people think of hemp, they think about a drug, they think about marijuana. And there's been a big propaganda movement that has changed the way that we look at this as a society. So today I'm here to try to reframe this from a different perspective that I think is a little more accurate. And what I'd like to talk about is you know, hemp is not a drug. Marijuana is not a drug. You know, it's a plant. And now, not only is it a plant, but picture if there was one plant on Earth that literally had thousands of known uses where you could produce textiles, paper, cosmetics. You know, you could eat it as a food, make plastic out of it. It could be used to turn into dynamite, make building material, and even process it into fuel. What if there was one plant that could help end our dependence on foreign oil, help save our forests, protect the environment, reverse climate change? If there was one plant that could single-handedly stimulate the economy, create a multi-billion-dollar industry, and pull our country out of a recession? And what if this plant just happened to grow faster than any other plant on Earth? It was cheap, easy to grow, it doesn't require herbicides or pesticides, and it actually increases the fertility of the soil and improves quality while naturally killing all the weeds. I'd like to say this plant exists, and that plant is called cannabis hemp, or cannabis, also known as hemp. And actually, it's it's kind of funny that it's known as a weed, because one thing that farmers might know about hemp as a plant is that it's great for growing because it kills a lot of the weeds. And you don't need the herbicides and pesticides when growing it. And give me 1 second here, I'm a little out of place. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Alright, well, I'm just going to go into it. This is a page here, but just like a little basic background info on hemp. Once again, hemp, often referred to as marijuana, has been given a bad rap as a drug. But we got to quit referring it to as a drug, and we have to remember that it's just a plant. And not only is it a plant, but it's one of the most useful plants on the face of the planet. And it's been used for thousands and thousands of years, since before recorded history. It's worked alongside and evolved with us and humankind, and has just been just like a big tool for development in all sorts of textiles and industry. Also, as far as hemp is concerned, hemp is the male part of the cannabis plant, where marijuana is the female part of the cannabis plant. And that's important to remember because people think of hemp as marijuana and they say that you could get high from it. But there's actually two totally different things right here. You cannot get high from smoking hemp. Hemp only has 0.03% of THC, which is a psychoactive ingredient that gets you high, whereas high-quality cannabis that you use for smoking, the female plant, has between 15 and 20% THC to it. So it's physically impossible to get high from smoking hemp, so that shouldn't even be part of the argument, but too often it is. The other thing to remember about growing hemp is this kind of plays into the misperception of the plant. Is people say that if you're growing hemp, it's going to be the door for marijuana growers to hide it in the fields, hide marijuana growing. But that's actually not true, because if you know about how the plant grows, hemp is bred to have a low THC content. So that's actually the worst thing that any marijuana grower would want to have in their field is a hemp plant around, because one hemp plant could literally pollinate all the crops and it would reduce the quality of the product. So if you're growing to smoke, you don't want to have this industrial plant around, because it would actually reduce your quality of the plant. The other thing to know about hemp is that currently cannabis is regulated as a Scheduled I controlled substance by the DEA. And that means that it has no currently accepted medical use. It's regulated the same thing as methamphetamines, heroin, cocaine, like all the major drugs. And that's one of the main reasons why it's actually not being used right now as a viable product, or because of these federal regulations. Okay, go next. The next thing to know is that there's been a long history of hemp on the planet. And actually it's been around for thousands of years. And it's kind of funny because thinking about the first marijuana laws, actually the first marijuana laws in the United States mandated that farmers actually grow hemp. Every colonist, before actually our country was founded in 1619, in the Jamestown, King James ordered all farmers to grow Indian hemp seed, at least 100 plants. So it's something to think about that. Right now we look at it as something that's illegal and it was being regulated, but there was actually a point in history when it was mandated by law that you had to produce it, and this actually continued into the early colonial times in Massachusetts and Chesapeake Bay. And actually at one point hemp was even used as a legal tender in the Americas because they wanted to incentivize farmers to grow it because it was so useful. And some of the uses originally is that, you know, all the ships that would sail to America, all the sails, the cordage, all the clothes that the sailors would wear, you know, all these things were made from hemp. And even the American flag, Betsy Ross was sewing it and made out of hemp. The first couple declarations of independence were written on hemp paper. And that's something to think about because there's actually a long historic tradition in America of hemp. And let me bring up one picture here.
Betsy Ross soda hemp flag.
Yeah, Jesus used me.
And so I guess we should ask, like, why hemp became illegal. And I guess this kind of goes to why it has gotten a bad rap, because there was one point when everyone just understood that this was just a great commodity. But there was actually a large propaganda campaign in our history, and there's reasons behind that. A lot of them are kind of financial. It goes back to William Randolph Hearst, and he had some industries in a paper mill that would use tree pulp. So the last thing that he wanted was hemp pulp competing against his paper operation for all his newspapers. So around the early 1930s, all these propaganda campaigns would come out, and I'll just show you a couple of posters for it. And you see Devil's Harvest, a good girl until she lights a reefer. The truth about marijuana, the smoke of hell. You can see a very seductive pose there. How about this? The smoke of hell, the devil's weed. A vicious racket with its arms around your children. Sin, degradation, vice, insanity, debauchery.
Sounds good.
We should be something to the Pope and see what happens.
Marijuana, weed with the roots of hell. And I should say these were very fear-based propaganda campaigns. You know, with the videos that they would show in these movies, like in one of them is Reefer Madness, you know, they show people getting stoned and then literally attacking each other. And I think we all know that, you know, marijuana isn't the drug that does that. Usually it kind of chills people out a little bit and might even prevent someone from attacking someone else. But, you know, these were really powerful campaigns back then. Look, marijuana, the assassin of youth. Marijuana gold. Never was there so spoken a novel as this, telling the plain, uncensored truth about teenage addicts and their desperate search for thrills.
I like this limbo
All right. There we go.
Hey, Lincoln was smoking milk.
Actually, I got a good. There we go. Let me get to Lincoln. Two of my favorite things are sitting on my front porch, smoking a pipe of sweet hemp, and playing my Horner harmonica. Abraham Lincoln. So I thought that was appropriate in instance today. So, and then, you know, so here's some quotes from some of our founding fathers. You know, George Washington said, "Make the most of Indian hemp seed and sow it everywhere." Thomas Jefferson, "Hemp is a first necessity to the wealth and protection of the country." And then we even get up to people like Henry Ford. Let me see, other presidents. Yeah, Jimmy Carter, President, penalties against drug possession should not be more damaging to an individual than the drug itself, and where they are, they should be changed. There you go. So, but even in like the early beginning of the country, I mean, it just goes to show that a lot of our founding fathers that we respect and admire and we always quote, they were big hemp advocates and hemp growers, and not only for growing it for industrial purposes, but also for either recreational or inspirational purposes. Actually, at Thomas Jefferson's home, they were currently still growing hemp seed up until the 1970s when the law came, because they were just recreating his farm. So, let's see. All right, I guess we're moving on. I guess I'm going to start showing a video because the next thing I want to show you is just how this has changed. So there was a time when hemp was acceptable. Not only was it acceptable, but it was encouraged. But then came across the propaganda movement when there was competing industrial interests. But then there comes a time when once again you need hemp, because during World War II, the United States Navy was dependent on the hemp from the Philippines, and when Japan took over, they didn't have their hemp crop for their ships. So all of a sudden there came this big propaganda campaign now in favor of hemp, encouraging farmers once again to grow industrial hemp in the United States. So I guess we can just take a few minutes and then I'll show a few short videos. The first one is Hemp for Victory.
temples were new, hemp was already old in the service of mankind. For thousands of years even then, this plant had been grown for cordage and coarse cloth in China and elsewhere in the East. For centuries prior to about 1850, all the ships that sailed the western seas were rigged with hempen rope and sails. For the sailor, no less than the hangman, hemp was indispensable. A 44-gun frigate, like our cherished old Ironsides, took over 60 tons of hemp for rigging, including an anchor cable 25 inches in circumference. Conestoga wagons and prairie schooners of pioneer days were covered with hempen canvas. Indeed, the very word canvas comes from the Arabic word for hemp. In those days, hemp was an important crop in Kentucky and Missouri. Then came cheaper imported fibers for cordage, like jute, sisal, and manila hemp, and the culture of hemp in America declined. But now, with Philippine and East Indian sources of hemp in the hands of the Japanese, and shipment of jute from India curtailed, American hemp must meet the needs of our Army and Navy, as well as of our industries. In 1942, patriotic farmers, at the government's request, planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand %. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp. In Kentucky, much of the seed hemp acreage is on river bottom land such as this, along the Kentucky River Gorge. Some of these fields are inaccessible except by boat. Thus, plans are afoot for a great expansion of the hemp industry as a part of the war program. This film is designed to tell farmers how to handle this ancient crop, now little known outside Kentucky and Wisconsin. This is hemp seed. Be careful how you use it. For to grow hemp legally, you must have a federal registration and tax stamp. This is provided for in your contract. Ask your AAA committeeman or your county agent about it. Don't forget, hemp demands a rich, well-drained soil such as is found here in the bluegrass region of Kentucky or in central Wisconsin. It must be loose and rich in organic matter. Poor soils won't do. Soil that will grow good corn will usually grow hemp. Hemp is not hard on the soil. In Kentucky, it has been grown for several years on the same ground, though this practice is not recommended. A dense and shady crop, hemp tends to choke out weeds. Here's a Canada thistle that couldn't stand the competition. Dead as a dodo. Thus, hemp leaves the ground in good condition for the following crop. For fiber, hemp should be sown 5 pecks to the acre. With drill, the closer the rows, the better. These rows are spaced about 4 inches. This hemp has been broadcast. Either way, it should be sown thick enough to grow a slender stalk. Here's an ideal stand. The right height to be harvested easily, thick enough to grow slender stalks that are easy to cut and process. Stalks like these here on the left, they yield the most fiber and the best. Those on the right are too coarse and woody. For seed, hemp is planted in hills like corn, sometimes by hand. Hemp is a dioecious. The female flower is inconspicuous, but the male flower is easily spotted. In seed production, after the pollen has been shed, these male plants are cut out. These are the seeds on a female plant. Hemp for fiber is ready to harvest when the pollen is shedding and the leaves are falling. In Kentucky, hemp harvest comes in August. Here, the old standby has been the self-rake reaper, which has been used for a generation or more. Hemp grows so luxuriantly in Kentucky that harvesting is sometimes difficult, which may account for the popularity of the self-rake with its lateral stroke. A modified rice binder has been used to some extent. This machine works well in average hemp. Recently, the improved hemp harvester, used for many years in Wisconsin, has been introduced in Kentucky. This machine spreads the hemp in a continuous swath. It is a far cry from this fast and efficient modern harvester to the Armstrong model of yore. But here's one kind of harvester, at least, that doesn't stall in the heaviest hemp. In Kentucky, hand cutting is practiced in opening fields for the machines. In Kentucky, hemp is shucked as soon as safe after cutting, to be spread out for retting later in the fall. In Wisconsin, hemp is harvested in September. Here, the hemp harvester with automatic spreader is standard equipment. Note how smoothly the rotating apron lays the swath preparatory to retting. Here it is a common and essential practice to leave headlands around hemp fields. These strips may be planted to other crops, preferably small grain. Thus, the harvester has room to make its first round without preparatory hand cutting. Here the machine is running over corn stubble. When the cutter bar is much shorter than the hemp is tall, overlapping occurs. Not so good for retting. The standard cut is 8 to 9 feet. The length of time hemp is left on the ground to ret depends on the weather.
All right. I'm going to move on to like a second video. I just kind of wanted to show you a little bit about that because you could see that back, in the 1940s, we obviously had all the technology that we needed to harvest hemp quite efficiently. And if you can imagine what we have today, man, it would just be, we could produce more than abundance. And so this was Hemp for Victory, which was the pilot program to get farmers to start growing hemp. Now, there was a town in Illinois, Polo, Illinois, that actually was one of the first towns in the country to actually start the pilot program. And so this next video I'm going to put on, it talks about how the hemp movement for the war came right home to Illinois. And here we go.
Somebody said, you really need to take this up to Milwaukee, to the big energy fair up there. They said the people who promote hemp up there are a little different looking than what you are. For the Lincoln Historical Society. The reason this Northwest Territory even opened in the first place in 1825 was because of the lead mines in Galena. Then when the Illinois Central Railroad wanted to come through around 1854, 55, along in there, Zenith Applington owned 160 acres in here, gave or sold the land to the Illinois Central Railroad. The railroad went through, and it was the beginning of Polo. Applington eventually became a senator and was a personal friend of Abraham Lincoln. When we set up this Schoolhouse Museum in 2001, we looked at things that we could put in it, but different displays. So we put in the stagecoach at the front of doing the trail. We put a little corner for the stagecoach display. Then we have a little corner over here for the 1832 Black Hawk War, because Lincoln crossed the schoolyard in 1832 as a 23-year-old military man. And then we have a corner with a hemp display. Hemp was a very old crop in the United States. In fact, it went back 150 years. Hemp itself just kind of phased out. By 1933, there was no market for it, and less than 50 tons of fiber were produced in the United States. Then when the war, World War II came around.
You ready for another bowl?
All right, now it was time when Java and the Philippines were taken over. It was time then to see where could we grow it in the United States.
Patriotic farmers, at the government's request, planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand percent. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp.
Polo was picked as the pilot program. The Polo was selected throughout the United States to be the pilot program. And I just thought that was really neat.
As for the United States Navy, every battleship requires 34,000 feet of rope, and other craft accordingly. So here in the Boston Navy Yard, where cables for frigates were made long ago, crews are now working night and day making cordage for the fleet.
Because it was a government program. He told them, I think, more as a patriotic duty, because we didn't have any rope, because the Japanese had overrun the Philippines and Java and part of Indonesia. I'm very active, and my granddad, Luther, was the one that raised the hemp. And I remember him talking about it for quite a bit. And we did raise it in 43, and he was ready to go again in 44, but then we discontinued the program, and the Japanese got driven out of the Philippines. My granddad had about 25 acres of it. One of the larger growers in the county.
But it was like raising corn. You find a little bit soon, hemp was kind of resistant to light frost, so it could go a little later if it had to, which was a kind of a production problem in a way in the fall because it wouldn't rot quite as quick. And the thing about hemp is it didn't rot. It's pretty much mildew resistant, and that's why the ships were using it on the ropes for the mastheads and stuff. I knew some of the neighbors that would, including some of my own cousins and uncles, but a lot of it was mostly because of patriotic duty rather than something that was convenient, because it was a new crop and nobody really knew anything about it.
Thus, plans are afoot for a great expansion of the hemp industry as a part of the war program. This film is designed to tell farmers how to handle this ancient crop, now little known outside Kentucky and Wisconsin. This is hemp seed. Be careful how you use it. For to grow hemp legally, you must have a federal registration and tax stamp. This is provided for in your contract. Ask your AAA committee man or your county agent about it.
I think 1943 and there were meetings held at the high school as to advise us how to grow it. And that stamp cost $1, but they never collected it. They were so eager for everyone to grow it. As I recall, they didn't charge us for the seed. The soil preparation had to be a good seed bed. You planted a drill. The seed was hardy because everybody would come up with it. It was a very thick stand. You could hardly walk through it, and on good ground it would grow to 8 or 10 feet tall. Slender stalk, as big as your little finger.
And this particular plant they had was, well, it was Cannabis sativa, but the thing was, it was not the variety that would cause you to get high on drugs, because it didn't have any.
Use an ideal stand. The right height to be harvested easily, thick enough to grow slender stalks that are easy to cut and process. Thick enough to grow slender.
One thing to know about the hemp plant is how tall it grows.
Yeah.
So quick, look at that thing. And that's just in under 4 months. That's like one of the fastest growing plants on earth right there. And it grows so thick, so you can see that's producing a lot of tonnage of fiber. And it produces many times more fiber than most plants per acre. And it's a high yielding plant.
Slender stalks that are easy to cut and process.
You sure didn't need any weed spray. It was so dense that the weeds didn't have a chance. And then again, it come up soon enough and quick enough that it got ahead of the weeds. I don't recall any weeds at all in it.
Here's a kind of a thistle that couldn't stand the competition. Dead as a dodo. Thus, hemp leaves the ground in good condition for the following crop.
Now, 43 was kind of a wet year, especially in August. It was also hotter than normal. So it was a case where this stuff worked very well for that kind of hemp.
It was cut with a John Deere power takeoff binder. It was made particularly for this tall crop. It was supposed to lay there at least 3 weeks, depending on the weather, to season, dry, or whatever. And it was supposed to be turned. Some people did. I'll have to confess. I went once across the field and decided that was for somebody else.
My granddad didn't do it the way that most of them do it, because what he did, he took a binder, same one for doing oats. He'd take off all the oat stuff and just run it straight through it on the ground. A lot of them had a special binder, and they didn't plant those unless they had the binder.
International Harvester made a pickup machine as every bit as wide as the tallest hemp. It had fingers on it. It picked it up and pushed it back into an otter, and they had the baling twine in a box just like you would have in a grain binder, and tied it in bundles, and
only took about another 3 weeks to finish rotting it, and then they could go out there and they were using the German prisoners from up near Rockford, Camp Grant, which is where the Greater Rockford Airport is now located. They'd come down and they would have turn it and they would shot to death.
They had 2 armed guys with them. Those fellows worked just like good kids would, you know. And they wouldn't have needed a guard. They were here and they were shooting at them, and the neighbor, George Gates, attacked a little German, and they would converse, you know, and after they would feel a little more at home. Well, worked and then worked with them. You just didn't talk to them, you just laid like 10 prisoners of war, you just took 10 cigarettes and laid it out. You don't touch them. Pretty soon you see all 10 on yourself. They done the work then.
Now the stuff was 11 feet tall. It's kind of a challenge. We never really said how they got it out of there. And I've talked with some of the other people who remember it. It was a pretty, since it was so long, we couldn't put a crossroads because we could run every car off the road. These highways are a lot narrower than they are today.
I was with my dad, he hauled it. And they put it crossways on the truck, and you know what, get 12-foot stuff on a truck, you're pretty wide. Well, we run in trouble with the state cops. They wanted to find my dad, but they put it on trucks and wagons, and they wouldn't bother them because they were ornamental. They moved most of it by hay racks and tractors. And you had to get on the highway because the plant was located on the highway. You couldn't come in the back road. So, but I was saying, I think the government paid them about $85 an acre.
We had our days that you could have it up to the hemp mill. Otherwise, everybody would have been there once and been in organized confusion. Took it up there and waited, and out to the stockyard, which is west of the present hemp mill. There were all that many buildings up there at that time. There was a main office building to the front, and scales, and the processing machinery they had. As I recall, it made about 125 bushels per acre, which wasn't bad. They were had out highways over here to the mail, I think. Then the government hired me one day to throw it past behind the binder, but they wouldn't pay me. I didn't have a Social Security number. Well, the fiber, of course, was on the outside of the stock, and they run it through breakers to break that inside the hip. But the fibers were long and strong.
If I remember right, it was about 900 pounds of fiber per acre. After we got done growing it, and then we hauled it in, then we found out that, well, the ground was really depleted.
I thought the ground was kind of mushy in the spring when it thawed out. It didn't hit the ground. Some thought it was hardly out on the land. We never found that the case. It was a lot like soybeans as far as the root was concerned. It loosened the soil almost too much. Because if you would get any soil erosion through the winter or the spring, the land would wash too much. We didn't have any trouble like that. We would have put the field in corn the next year. And if anything, it stimulated instead of depleting the soil. We didn't find it destructive at all.
We thought that they should go for one more year, everybody on different land if they had it, or use that as emergency backup. Because, well, you never sure where things are going to go. Even though the Japanese were being driven out, they could do like the British did in the Battle of the Bulge and make one huge offensive. So they thought they should have some on hand. Well, they didn't do it that way. And it turned out the government won on that but we never know.
It was just another crop. It wasn't any different than corn crop. It was a war effort, you know, just like we gathered up all the old iron and held out to the junkyard. But it was our way of contributing. We just plain had to do it.
It would seem that hemp could come back as another crop. I don't know whether it ever would or not. This is part of our history. This patriotic duty. Maybe they weren't going to make quite as much as they might on another crop, but this was my war effort, and this is how I could help out.
Hemp or victory?
says, government grown, how Polo, Illinois helped win the war.
Let's hear it for him. Hip, hooray!
Hip, hip, hooray! It shows that after that pilot program, a lot of the farmers that enjoyed that they were growing hemp, and they wanted to keep it going because they found that hemp had a lot of benefits for the soil. Some pictures here.
Yeah, I bet they enjoyed that.
Yeah. End of the day.
Told you I did.
And
Yeah, what's about that too?
as far as like the benefits for farmers, they liked it because one, it's an alternative crop. They're looking for alternative crops to add into the rotation. It's very versatile. It can be grown anywhere from northern Canada to South America. It's easy to grow. It grows. It can grow up to -5 degrees Celsius. It doesn't. It's resistant to the frost. Once again, it's one of the fastest growing plants on Earth. It's resistant to diseases, pests, and because of that, it doesn't require a lot of the pesticides, herbicides that a lot of other plants are needed. And ultimately, it's good for the soil. It kills weeds, it loosens it up, it provides good tilth the next year, so there's good soil quality. And farmers notice that with, not only can you use it for monoculture, and it's kind of self-subsistent with the soil, where you could kind of grow it on the same same soil year-round, or year after year, but also with crop rotation, if you rotate it with like a cereal crop or a legume, Canadian farmers notice like a 15% seasonal increase in yield every time the next crop is rotated, and sometimes a nutritional content yield increase of up to 20%. So ultimately, hemp is an industrial cash crop. There's thousands of products that this plant can create. And just to give you a little overview, because it does more than just make rope for warships, there's actually thousands of known uses for the plant. Let's see if some of these pictures open. Okay.
Yeah, the bottom smoking though.
There we go. You can see that. Let's see if I can find a better one. But what's interesting about the hemp plant is you could pretty much use every part of the plant, from the stalk to the leaves to the seeds to the flower. And let's see, I got this good overview here.
Pat Robertson.
Pat Robertson? Well, Pat Robertson recently came out in support of legalizing cannabis because, of course, cannabis is a plant that comes from God. God grows it, and you shouldn't make nature illegal because that's the Lord's creation. So, on to that. And this just gives a little rundown of, what the plant can do if, from the stalk to the seed. We actually have some hemp products here. Maybe I'll pass them around.
Frank, who says all religion is bad? He must have something in mind behind that.
He probably does.
The first thing about hemp is you can eat it. Here's my personal favorite. This is hemp protein. Hemp is one of the biggest, the one source of protein that has all your essential omegas and amino acids in one source, and that's good for vegetarians. You can if you want to. It's a little bit dry. I recommend mixing it with some. Yeah, it's just a protein powder, but you throw it into your drink. It's great for vegetarians who might not get enough protein, because it's all your omegas in one source right there. And here's some other hemp products. Maybe we could take a look. We have we got here some soap. Hemp makes great soap. Why make soap from oil? We can make it from plants. There's hemp. And then there's hemp oil, essential fatty acids. And then hemp milk, of course. Hemp beverage. You grind down the seed into a powder and make some milk. So it's very versatile. You could eat the seed just raw and add it to salads. We have more hemp seed, raw shelled. And This one goes around, so hemp products.
You also have a hat there that's partial
Hemp hat. Now hemp is an awesome fiber for textiles, especially for clothing, because it's both stronger and softer than cotton. And it requires less chemicals to process, so it's better for the environment. And probably one of the most important uses that I think of hemp is, of course, paper. Right now we're cutting down so many trees for paper, and it's really totally senseless. If you knew that every acre of hemp could actually produce 4 times as much cellulose fiber for paper as trees can. And here you have trees that take 30 years to grow, where a full hemp crop can be harvested in 4 months. So, you do the math. It's like we're cutting down these trees that take years and years to grow. And you have a crop that you could produce it in a fraction of the time and produce an even greater yield. And hemp paper also requires less processing than tree pulp, and there's less chemicals used in the process. So there's textiles, there's food. The other thing that you could do is actually make plastics from hemp, and that's something that many people don't know about. And so I wanted to show you a picture here. Where is it? There's a car that Henry Ford built that was made with a hemp polymer. And as you can see, he's taking an axe to the car to test the strength of it. And so really we could build cars out of hemp, and that was Henry Ford's vision, as he was quoted as saying that he wants to see cars grown from the ground. And hemp was one of the things to do it. There's actually a lot of parts of the hemp, from the cushions on the inside to the lining, but even the panels. And the panels are actually very durable, they're resilient, they're lighter than metal. If you get scratched or someone scratches your car, you could just buff it out, it doesn't rust. So there's many advantages of having a hemp car. That's Henry Ford.
You don't laugh, he did that with soybeans too.
Yeah. And the other thing you could do is not only build a car from hemp, but you could drive a car that's fueled with hemp fuel, because hemp is a great source for biomass. And I think this is a really important resource, because right now we're very energy, we're importing all this oil from foreign countries, and here we could be growing our oil, our fuel for our cars right in our own backyards, and powering our cars with hemp. And anyone who doesn't think it works, you can make methanol with hemp. And methanol is used for race cars, so if it's good enough for a race car, I think it's good enough for your average car. And so that's one car that's powered by hemp, but I want to just show you that it's not... look at this hemp car right here. Here's kind of a sexier design for a car, so you can have an eco-friendly car that actually looks good, it's functional, it's effective.
You don't know where you go.
Don't drive on it, when you're smoking it, but...
We'll pick up some hemp. Yeah.
Pick up some hemp with that thing. It wouldn't be great if you, picture going to a gas station and seeing camel oil, the world's best biofuel. You can also build with hemp. Hemp makes great building material. So here's a house, design of a house that's actually built with hemp. And hemp is a great insulator because it doesn't wear out very much. It's resilient to pests. So there's actually some pretty cool designs, and you could make everything from bricks with it, use it for insulation. And this is called hemp creep. It's a mixture of hemp and lime, designed to build, not to smoke. And there's some hemp, picture of some hemp insulation. All right. There's a variety of hemp products, just the handbags. So as you can see, there's there's hemp cosmetics. You could have hemp food, granola, balms. So there's so many purposes for hemp. There's over 50,000 known products. of industry, aside from even thinking about it as a medicine or a recreational drug. That's why people say that hemp can save our planet. You know, it's a billion dollar crop. And oh yeah, here's one more hemp car that I thought was pretty cool. It's an eco-friendly car, and that's built with hemp polymers. All right. Now, one thing I want to bring up is, now we've kind of gone over just some of the uses of hemp, some of the products, but I want to tell you a little bit about what the Illinois Department of Agriculture had to say about why hemp isn't feasible as a crop in the United States, because they started a pilot program and they said, they had this report in 2000 called The Potential of Hemp in the United States, and they said, hemp's not a viable crop because it's too easy to grow, it's too cheap, it grows too fast, and it would immediately produce a superabundance. And therefore, it would drive the cost down to nothing, and the farmers wouldn't be able to afford to keep their product going. They can't keep the production going because it grows too fast, it's too cheap, too affordable, too easy, and would produce abundance. And therefore, it's a bad thing. So, one thing they didn't, it's kind of a biased report because they only listed hemp as they said you could use it maybe for animal bedding, maybe you could use it for rope. They didn't talk about paper in the report, they don't talk about fuel, plastics, food, any of the other things, any of the thousands and thousands of known uses. And I think that's even indicative of another major problem of our whole economic system that actually I learned from studying hemp, is that why do you have something it's too functional to exist in our economy? That just shows that our economic system is kind of backwards when something's too successful, too abundant, that it fails. And I think that's what kind of revealed to me about the other nature of capitalism, because it kind of mandates scarcity. It makes sure you keep a limited supply of resources, an artificial scarcity, planned obsolescence. And hemp, maybe that's why hemp's illegal, because it doesn't really fit into that capitalist model. It's not something that maybe we're meant to profit off financially, but we should be profiting off of it for its resources, for its ability to provide, all these economic resources for us. So. Here's, of course, Barack Obama smoking some marijuana, and it shows if you could be president, but that kind of begs the question as to what if, with these laws, right now there's statistics say that 17 million Americans use recreation marijuana or marijuana either recreationally or medicinally every month. So that means by our current state of laws that there's 17 million criminals walking around in the United States right now.
Yeah, they're in Congress.
And most of them are in Congress. And so I think it just goes to show that we can't be criminalizing an entire section of our population because maybe one day some of those people might become president. You never know. So there's Henry Ford, he says, why use up the forests which were centuries in the making and these mines which required ages to lay down if we can get the equivalent forest and mineral products and the annual growth of the hemp fields? And Henry Ford was a great innovator, and I think he saw the vision of how hemp could be used for industry. And so that's why I kind of just wrap it up on, is that as far as industrial hemp's concerned, is that this is a product that could really be $1 billion industry. We always see in California, just for its kind of recreational and medicinal use, it's adding billions of dollars to the economy. So if we open this up, instead of importing hemp, because currently we import $300 million worth of hemp from Canada and from China for our products, instead of just growing it here, we could bring these jobs back to America, back home, really, kind of get ourselves out of the depression, get ourselves out of this recession. So it's great all around. So that's kind of what we're doing with Illinois NORML, is we're working on a regular basis. I'm actually here talking for Dan Lynn. I kind of got called in the last minute because he's actually down in Springfield right now trying to get a hemp bill out onto the floor in Congress. So he's been working around the clock, and that's our next goal for right now, is to actually try to work in Illinois on a regular basis to get hemp legalized. You know, so yeah, there's some challenges to that, but we're working on it, and we meet once a month. I got some pamphlets here. If you guys are interested in getting maybe a little bit more involved with Illinois Normal, you guys got some? And I think one of our goals as far as trying to legalize it and get it legalized is to once again remember that there's been the stereotype and stigmatization of hemp being a drug, or marijuana being a drug. And I guess that's kind of my message for today, is let's not look at it as a drug, and we got to quit using that terminology, because that's just been a part of this old propaganda movement. But we got to remember this is a plant, and not only is it a plant, but this is one of the most resourceful plants in the history of mankind. And so we have to get beyond that stereotype, because yeah, it's really been kind of an excuse for people to not think twice about it and just overlook it. And it's such a valuable resource for us to have. Does anyone have any questions about that? Should we open the floor?
Yes, I have a couple of things right now.
Yeah, let's go.
First of all,
the J, man.
One thing is, it is subject to some type of diseases, viruses, molds, just like any other plant being. But one of the qualities that makes it good is that these diseases that it does have doesn't really necessarily affect the yield of the plant. You know, they're not inhibitive as to reducing crop yield. So even though you might have some type of disease with the plant, if you're growing it for industrial purposes, it doesn't necessarily affect yield.
The other question I have is, can you turn hemp into any kind of drinkable distilled spirit?
A spirit? I'm not sure. That's a good question. You know, it could definitely be added to the mix. You could make hemp extracts, and yeah, you could pretty much add hemp to anything. You can make hemp into butter, hemp into pretty much any food product. You can extract the psychoactive ingredient THC. I'm not sure. I have to look into that.
Speak loudly, please. Normal.
In Camp Grant near Polo, Illinois, prisoners of war to harvest the hemp. 30 years ago. Can you imagine them smoking the leaves?
Well, maybe they had a couple plants in there that weren't just a male plant, and maybe they were cultivating some for smoking. But yeah, it seemed like a good way to relax after a hard day's work.
I'm a little confused on this. It sounds like marijuana and industrial hemp are two different plants. And if so, can you grow hemp, industrial hemp, without having marijuana around?
Yes.
Well, yeah. Hemp, well, let me show you some pictures here that I could bring up to kind of illustrate the difference between the two plants. All right, one second.
Nobody forced anybody to smoke. Projector is off.
Okay, give me 1 second here. Okay, hemp. Oh, did you turn it off totally?
I'll get it. It'll take a second.
And I think, yeah, this is kind of a big problem too, just because I think some of the confusion around hemp and marijuana is part of the reason why maybe throughout society people are so afraid of it. And I think that if we got rid of this, you know, mistaken belief or just this misunderstanding about it, people would realize that it's a lot safer. Not that there's any negative side effects with other plants necessarily, but a lot of the fairs don't really exist. One, like I mentioned, is this the same species of plant, the cannabis plant. Hemp is typically the male plant, whereas marijuana is the female plant. Now, when you're growing hemp, as you can see, there's these long stalks right here. So that's kind of the main thing you're using here, is you're using the stalk of the plant, and if you're growing really close together, you know, so you're not getting another thing is the female plant. I'll show you some of these now. What a cannabis plant looks like if you're growing it for flowers. You see, that was real stocky. It grows tall. And here's some cannabis plants for flowers. And as you see here, instead of growing stalks, you're actually growing it for the flowers on top. And the flower is the bud that people smoke. And a lot of people don't know that it's a pretty beautiful flower, really. I don't know what people think. People think it looks like oregano or maybe some sticks in a bag. But it's a pretty extraordinary flower that has a lot of colors and character to it. You can see the blues and the reds. And so you could see that, you know, if there's a couple plants that look like that, you know, you could probably distinguish the two. But once again, there's just from the looks of it, these plants, you know, you're growing it for the tops of it, where the male plant, you're growing it for the stalk. Does that clarify what you were...
I was wondering if you had any personal ambition. Are you looking to, if it were legal, would you be looking to farm hemp or...
Yeah, I mean, personally, yeah, I'd probably keep a couple plants around, you know, for one use or another.
Have you had any alliances with someone who's
Let's keep the
a
conversations
farmer?
down. Well, you have to tell
Has
them.
Illinois Normal made
No, I
any
don't.
alliances?
Well, you don't.
I don't
with
have to be
someone
rude.
I know.
I'm not
personally actually
rude.
You don't have to be rude. They don't have to be rude either.
I think, I'm not sure, like right now, I'm sure Dan has been reaching out to farmers because he's looking for farmers to help us draft the bill. So there are some people who work with us on a state level. That'd kind of be more Dan's department, I think, because I don't personally know them, but I'm sure we are like working with different farmers and across the state. So.
All right, David Travis. Oh, Don. Excuse me.
They claim today marijuana is much stronger than it used to be. Is that truth to that?
Oh yeah, that's true.
What was the question?
The marijuana is stronger than today than it is back then. And yeah, through technology, you know, things are evolving, and the benefit of that is you don't need to inhale that much to get the same effect. So.
Another thing, they got unnatural instead of natural.
Right. And yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, right now they allow this kind of fake, it's like a synthetic cannabis product that's legal. And I've heard that people have actually died from smoking it. And, you know, so why not just do the real thing? Here's a plant that's evolved with mankind for thousands of years. And not one person in the history of the human civilization has ever overdosed from smoking cannabis. And that's a fact. Not one person. So there's a lot of trial and error in this department, and it's hasn't let us down. Yes?
Did you say somebody passed away from smoking Kush?
No, not Kush, but the synthetic cannabis. They have these new synthetic cannabis products that are legal. So I guess people are going towards that.
Right.
But I would recommend just the natural thing because it's something that's evolved with us over
I'm trying to
time.
educate myself.
David?
Mr. Callus. Yes. I'm all for the legals of the regulation and decriminalization of marijuana. But my question to you is, don't you think that that NORML would win a great deal more friends and influence a great deal more people if they didn't have the god-awful sound quality that your electronic audio presentation has?
Quite possibly. Work on our media skills. We're working on that.
life with that? We had a question about medical marijuana. What is it currently used for? What's it approved for? And are there any uses that's not approved for?
Yeah, I got a chart here. Well, what's interesting is that the federal government still doesn't recognize any medical benefits, even though, you know, for hundreds of years there's been scientific data showing that it has lots of benefits. Let me see if I have a chart on here. Let's see, here's a list of the diseases treated with cannabis. So, I mean, the list goes on. Some of it goes down to the state level. I mean, these are diseases that are known medically to be treated, but the law won't always let them be treated. But depending on what state you're in, you know, you might only be allowed for like multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, AIDS, hepatitis. But yeah, I mean, the list of therapeutic benefits really goes on. I mean, it's anti-inflammatory, so there's people with cancers that helps tumors. You know, it could be used as a balm, a salve. It could be ingested. So one thing that's another thing is people might not know that you don't even have to smoke medical cannabis in order to get the medical effects. You could actually bake it, and just by the heat activating the ingredient into the food, you could eat it, and then you'll have no effects of having any smoke inhalation if you're worried about that. So there's really zero side effects. And that's one thing I think is important about medicinal marijuana is that it can treat so many diseases, but at the same time, you know, there's no harmful side effects. Here you have pharmaceuticals that, well, we all see the commercials of, you know, may cause depression and anxiety and suicide and heart murmurs, and, you know, it's the worst. The side effects are worse than the disease themselves most of the time. So I think, you know, medical marijuana, the side effects are euphoria, hunger. You know, you could get your appetite back, and so.
Two-part question. One, can it be used for the treatment of fibromyalgia? And second, if could it be used as part of a treatment for those that clean athletes in Wrigley Field to maybe help them get the World Series going finally? You know, really have true hemp for victory.
That's a theory. Maybe we should take down the IV and maybe grow hemp in the backfield.
An IV's hemp-filled backfield, huh?
Yeah, how about it?
Yeah! Well, using hemp for fuel, global warming.
Well, you know, when you're burning biofuel, it obviously releases about the same amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as if you're burning fuel from oil, but the thing is when you're growing it, it takes that carbon dioxide out of the air. So there's, you know, it's an equal balance. There's the offset. The advantage of having biofuel is that there's no sulfides. Sulfides are the cause of acid rain. So there are benefits of having biofuel and biodiesel and hemp fuel as opposed to fuel from oil.
Charles?
It must be rather discouraging to go to Springfield. Like right now, they're authorizing fracking, and you come up with a renewable resource that can provide fuels and everything. Isn't it somewhat frustrating to run into this? I mean, these farmers want to sell their land one time and get rich on fracking, where they could be doing this forever. I mean, it just makes no sense.
Yeah, it is frustrating, but I think that's why, you know, we have to go down there and...
Do you have any champions in the...
Champions for the hemp bill? Actually, there's a couple of them, like Lou Lang was great, just he's the one who introduced the medical bill. Currently, I forget the gentleman's name, but he's an actual law enforcement officer, and he's looking to co-sponsor the hemp bill this time. So we have some people on board right now. One thing we're actually working on in Springfield is our friend who's here today, we just sent out a letter to all of our representatives, which is a survey on what their position is on industrial hemp, on medical marijuana, and on recreational use. So we sent out a mail letter to 160 all the representatives in the Senate and the Congress. We're waiting to hear back from them to see what their positions are, and then we're going to find out how to best target our lobbying campaign. So, but there are a couple people who are on board. The medical marijuana vote, it lost by 6 votes the last time around in the Senate. And actually, 2 people changed at the last second, so it was almost 4 votes it lost by. So medical marijuana was pretty close, and I think that that's a good sign for industrial hemp.
Dave Zucker?
Yes, I was looking at your leaflet here. Fibromyalgia is one of the things.
Oh, really? Yeah, you answered the question. It does treat fibromyalgia. I guess,
oh, let's see. Have we run out of questions? Oh, no. Yes, Margaret?
You have a whole list of things there. I've only heard like serious evidence on a couple of things. Do you have any references for any of that stuff?
Yeah. A lot of it is from. I can give you like a couple of sources for some of these videos, like that I got it from. I didn't cite it here just because I kind of put this together a little bit at the last minute, but if you have any specific questions about stuff and you want some research reference citations for, I could get that to you. It's
obesity, prostate cancer, diabetes. I mean, it sounds like Mrs. Smith's snake oil, that it cures everything from ingrown toenails to impotence. I mean, it really looks like what that list is, and I don't see any documentation.
Yeah, the women's complaints too.
Whatever.
I mean, actually, I should show you some. Cannabis has been used really for centuries for all sorts of purposes. I think Queen Elizabeth used to use it to soothe her menstrual cramps, and there's been so many historic instances about how long it's been used for, and that's kind of what's really odd about this, is that there's really overwhelming scientific proof in the medicinal benefits.
But can you give me some kind of references from some recognized medical centers that has gone through clinical trials? And I mean, because people have been using all kinds of things for all kinds of years, and whether they're effective or not is another question.
I guess I can't list any of them.
One technical difficulty is that our battery is really low.
He's not a...
Maybe we can use him for that too.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
I can tell you about 2 months ago, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. It was really bothering me, and then a friend of mine gave me a joint, and I took one. I couldn't breathe. Bottom of my lungs, I could just take little breaths. And then I smoked some marijuana, and I was able to take a little more, and it went away. But I thought I was going to have a heart attack. The marijuana maybe saved my life.
I guess that's what I ultimately say, is that there's the patient testimonials.
That's not enough for you.
I think the patient testimonials speak for themselves.
Yeah, you go to the hospital. Maybe they'll cut the wrong leg off.
Yeah, I mean, patients prefer medical marijuana than other things, and if you look at what I'd say we should apply that same standard to the pharmaceutical companies, because you see too often they'll have these pharmaceuticals that they'll come out with, and then once they realize it doesn't work for that cause, they'll remarket it for another one. And at the same time with these, you have really bad side effects. And I think that's the thing about marijuana, is let's let the patients choose. you know, I think it's the patient's right, it's all of our right to choose what's best for our own bodies, our own health care, and we need to see what works for us. And if we think that medical marijuana personally works for us, whatever our ailment is, then I think it's our right as people to be able to make that choice.
Like this, does it have uses for like our food base?
Oh yeah.
You can use
That
it for
specifically, yes.
Okay, and how about, can you get it in like a pill form? Or is there like a pill form that you can use rather than smoking or putting it in food?
You know what? I'm not sure about like the pill form, the capsule in particular. I would assume so, just because they have it in every other form imaginable.
Right.
But I know they have Marinol, which is, well, that's like a synthetic pill form. You know, I would recommend against maybe the synthetic form of it. That's where it's, you know, the THC is recreated in the lab. But yeah, they do make extracts that could be either oil, a salve, a topical ointment. You could, yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, but comment about clinical trials. Since it was Schedule 1 drug, it was very hard to get clinical. I was just answering your question. It's very hard to get clinical trials. So.
Right, because of its prohibition.
They have done medical.
Yeah, they've done some, but not nearly as much as a lot of other drugs.
But even to get these, you probably have to look to Canada to get these studies. I mean, because that was like, I was going to bring that point up too, because that's, you know, just because of the prohibition of it, doctors can't effectively test it to do the rigorous studies that it needs and that it deserves to have. But other countries like Canada have been doing some testing and more research on it.
I have a question myself, and that is that since there are different grades of potency in marijuana, shouldn't it be regulated graded so that people have an idea of what they're using when they do use it? And what about taxing? I understand that Lou Lang is for it, and he generally wants to raise state incomes by legalizing things that are otherwise illegal, gambling or whatever, by extending its use and taxing it. What do you see in that?
Well, with the first question, I guess it's an interesting concept to you know, if you buy a beer, you know if it's 8% alcohol or 4%, and it'd be interesting to know the THC content of the cannabis, maybe have that on the bottle or something. Yeah, that kind of gets into the specifics. I guess one thing that, like we are trying to get standards on is just getting hemp recognized as, you know, any cannabis plant that's under 0.03% THC. We need to have some legal regulation that separates that from marijuana and from cannabis, so that we can actually use it and grow it as hemp. Yeah, and as far as taxing it, you know, that's one of the main incentives for, I think, the lawmakers to want to bring this crop to Illinois. Is right now we're suffering one of the biggest deficits of any other state, and you know, we got to get ourselves out of this hole. You know, we really need something quick that could be a revenue generator, and obviously, you know, the marijuana industry in California has really been sustaining the local economy, as being brought billions of dollars in, and that's just for the medical uses. That's not talking about the industrial uses, the biofuels and hemp, or the housing and all that. So yeah, the economic generator is a big incentive, I think, the taxing of it.
Tim Boulder.
Can you give us a little bit about your background, how you became aware, and how you got involved with Illinois NORML?
My background.
Just a little bit about what your background is and how you got involved with the movement.
I guess I started researching hemp maybe about 10 or 11 years ago when I was in, maybe even longer ago, I was in high school at the time, and I just started learning about the benefits of it. And then the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to get involved because it seems like such a sensible thing for us to be doing as a society. I mean, just once you learn all the known uses. So that's kind of what got me involved, just once I became educated about it. And then I see Illinois NORML at the Peace Fest, I guess. You know, so I'd kind of come across them and I'd see them handing out literature, and I started getting involved. And now, you know, I help organize a space called Multiculti in Chicago. We're like a multicultural community center for arts activism, and Illinois NORML is one of the organizations that meet at our space once a month. And so ever since then, I've been getting more involved on a personal level. And lately, kind of my addition to Illinois NORML, Dan's mostly the guy with all the answers to the questions. I wish he was here today. But my kind of specialty in the organization is the direct action. And one thing that I'm kind of bringing to the table is the concept of jury nullification as a way to really take a direct action towards ending the drug war. And raise of the hands, how many people have heard of jury nullification here? How many people have not? All right. Well, one thing that people don't know is, you know, the jury is the one place where citizens wield ultimate power within our system of government. And by sitting on a jury, you have more power than the executive, legislative, and judicial branches because you ultimately have the right to judge the law and interpret whether or not it's being worthy of being enforced. And a lot of people forgot this power and don't realize that, you know, the purpose of the jury is to put a check on government. That's why it was created, to put a check on the king. And if the government gets out of control, it's the purpose of a jury to be, you know, to enforce justice and say, hey, we don't want this a law to apply. You know, we're going to defend our own citizens, our own people. This law is unjust. We're not going to enforce an unjust law. And that's the founding principles of what the jury was created for, but we've kind of forgotten about this. And right now the jury is really coerced by the prosecution to really just get convictions and send people behind bars because there's this big prison industrial complex. And the drug war and the criminalization of cannabis, minor drug offenses, and the 3 strikes law, you know, that's what's really fueling the prison industrial complex, and that's what's causing you know, what we have, the condition we have today is all because of the drug war. And, you know, we've tried to stop it through lobbying our government. You know, we've been petitioning and all that, but that hasn't really stopped it. So what I'm saying is, here's what we could do. This is kind of my contribution to NORML, is what I've been doing is I've been organizing a direct action campaign to occupy the courthouse and to educate jurors that by serving on a jury, you could simply vote not guilty and you could acquit non-violent drug offenders and just let them off. And that's the mantra, is no victim, no crime. If there's no victim involved, there shouldn't be a crime. So one thing we did, we went to the Cook County Courthouse, and every person that came in that morning, we just gave them literature, educating them about their rights. And I think that this is one of the most direct actions that we could take as citizens, bypassing the whole bureaucracy and just taking our action to the courthouse. And if we educate people that by serving on a jury, you could enforce justice and you don't have to send people to prison, I think that this could be one of the most effective ways of ending the drug war, just from a grassroots level. It's just by people saying, we're no longer going to enforce it, we don't support it, not guilty, you're free to go. So, okay, Tom.
Other technical journals, such as architectural journals, material science journals, industrial journals from other countries that talk about the use of...
Go ahead, honey. Go ahead, dear.
I'd have to look more into that as far as like regular journals. One thing I could point you towards is that you know, there was a documented in Popular Mechanics in the 1930s. There was this article about hemp being the new billion-dollar crop, and of course this was right before the prohibition with the Marijuana Tax Act. Yeah, I'm not sure about recent journals. I'll have to look into it, but yeah, there's a lot of literature available, like even in America. You know.
Has your ever speculated on why Obama continues to raid medical marijuana dispensaries in California and why he is so harsh on marijuana? I think that he's
Well, we definitely think it's pretty hypocritical because obviously when he was being elected, he ran on the campaign that he was going to try to end the drug war. He said that the federal resources would be better spent going after criminals instead of nonviolent drug users. But he turned on his campaign promises, and since he's been in office, he's actually, I think, raided more marijuana dispensaries, I think by about 4 times as much than George Bush, his predecessor, who we thought was bad to begin with. Yeah, so we're definitely not happy with that.
Do you have any clue as to why he's been so?
My personal beliefs. I mean, I think that the whole system is kind of corrupt. And, you know, it's in a nutshell. I mean, I never really had too much faith in them to begin with, just because I think that's what the system represents. If they, you know, they have the power right now to put an end to this drug war, you know, we should do it. You know, I think if they really wanted to be the one that was leading that change, they would have done so already. So, I don't know what to say. I wish he would, you know, follow through with his campaign promises, but.
The type of lobbying dollars that they have are nowhere near what's equal to the type of lobbying dollars that drug millers have. People who actually make the stuff that you get over the counter have a lot more liquid resources as far as to get their message across. There is now a rule that says that cash equals free speech. And the reason that that's said is so that lobbying groups can spend as much money on a particular candidate as they want to, in order to try and influence their actions. He does not have the type of backing, grassroots support. I mean, we would require 7 million people. Oh, do I have to have a question? I'm sorry, I thought I was helping them out.
That was a good point, just being the fact that, you know, these are some of the biggest lobbies in America. The Corrections Corporation of America, you know, it's a multi-billion-dollar lobby. And to be honest with you, it's like, yeah, we can't really compete with that type of publicity, you know. For every, you know, we get to go to the lobby, the Capitol, like once a month. We'll have a table set up there. We'll go to the representatives, but they have hired staff who are lined up every day. And not only do they have people lined up there, but I don't know if you know about this, but they actually, the lobbyists themselves pay these pages to stand in line so that, you know, as soon as they get there, they just walk in and pretty much have direct access to anyone they want to talk to. So I guess that's probably another thing. It's just the money, the lobbying and paying, to get that opinion across, which just understates the importance of us kind of getting together and being our own voice. Because if they don't hear from us, they will be hearing from these correctional corporations who are trying to get more people in their private prisons.
We have a rebuttal period.
Good.
It's getting close to where we should start taking care of it. I don't know where Brom is at this point, but
There's Brom right here.
It's right there.
You're ready to start rebuttals, Brom? Let's go ahead and get started.
Well, we're ready to go.
What do you think of the Chicago ordinance, which supposedly decriminalizes marijuana and has a big fine?
My personal take is a little bit different than I think what most people think. I don't think that they did it because it was a conscientious decision. They didn't do it because they wanted to limit the criminal penalties and they're concerned about people. In my personal opinion, I think that they realized that the Chicago police are actually too busy trying to chase real criminals, that too often they would be reluctant to actually enforce the law. So if they caught you with cannabis, they would most likely just let you go. And I think that the city realized that the police weren't really enforcing the drug law. And I think that the ticket system is just a way to try to tighten the net so that fewer people get through. And one thing we got to remember is that the ordinance, it doesn't really decriminalize it. It's an optional ticket, so you still have the option of being arrested. So, and if you're caught smoking in public, you could still get arrested. If you have a pipe, you still get arrested. So I don't think that the decriminalization ordinance was really about trying to lessen the punishment or be more humane towards people. I really think it's just about generating more revenue through a tax system and the ticket system.
How come we had that prohibition amendment?
That's a good point. Yeah, in order to get alcohol prohibition, they had to pass a constitutional amendment, you know, but they just kind of pushed this by, and I think that talks about like the propaganda movement that they had. And it's kind of interesting if you watch the movie Prohibitions, the Ken Burns documentary. It's interesting just the parallels between alcohol prohibition and cannabis prohibition, because there was really a scare campaign for alcohol prohibition too that kind of scared people into making it illegal. And I think that's one of the reasons. I think that propaganda campaign is what allowed them to kind of pull the wool over our eyes and just get that passed through. But yeah, that's a good point. It's like, you know, it's kind of a double standard there, and we saw that prohibition failed with alcohol, and it's failing today. You know, prohibition creates the same type of criminal enterprise. You know, there's a group called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and there's actually thousands of law enforcement officers around the country who have come together and speak out against the drug war. And what they say is that from a statistical basis, every type of thing that you would want to prevent with prohibition is actually exacerbated by prohibition. It increases the gang violence, it increases the murder rate, it increases just the number of drugs flowing into the communities, the purity of drugs, the overdose rate. If you really wanted to control these things, the best thing to do is to regulate it. And therefore, by having it on the black market, there's no government regulation whatsoever. So there's no oversight. You know, criminal, just drug dealers don't necessarily card you. They're not trying to see if you're 18 to buy a product. They're not necessarily concerned with the quality of their product. But if there's, regulated by the government, then you could ensure standards of quality, business ethics, and not so.
I've heard a motion to move to our rebuttal period. How many people here have remarks to make? Neil, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5? No comments from over here? 6? All right, well, we'll start off with 6. So, suppose we have 5 minutes apiece. Okay, I'll set the timer for 5 minutes. You come up here, grab one of those chairs, and come to speak. I'll try the speakers. Okay.
All right, let's take our speakers.
Yeah. You might want to answer some of them. You get the final answer, or final rebuttal. Rebuttal of rebuttals. No respect.
I wanted to point out regarding prohibition that the repeal of prohibition in the 1930s was an attempt to make alcohol available in order to control the angry masses who were unemployed. Now we may have to wait until the angry masses of unemployed people gets pretty large before we get a prohibition repeal of marijuana use. But I did want to point out that the Chicago Astronomical Society has an astrophysical observatory on a farm near Kankakee on 20 acres. And we will be willing, in order to pay for future research, to sell or lease quarter-acre lots to anyone who wants to grow whatever they want to grow there, and on a sharecropping basis. So contact me if you want to do that.
Mainly, I am taking in information today, not giving much out, but my family, my sister and my brother, lived in Polo, Illinois. I know, it's sort of the end of the world. But then they moved to, get this, Kentucky. So these two play, I'll call them on the phone and tell them about this. Our system sort of is backwards. I'm going to a alternate practitioner for my health, and I think he helped me. Of course, I'm an example of one, so all I can say is, hey, it works for me. But one of the things he tells me is, eat a lot of salad. Now, other than on Channel 11, I haven't heard much about anybody telling me to eat salad, because there's no money in it. There's no big money. They're telling you to, what do you see? You see all the pharmaceuticals on all the commercial channels, which I don't watch. I don't see much of it on Channel 20 and Channel 11. That might be a standard. Of course, they're kind of deteriorating too. They're getting commercials. But I would say just because something hasn't had a lot of research, that doesn't mean it might be good. It's just that hardly anybody wants to pay for research to tell you that Chicago water is better than bottled water, or that salad is better than a pharmaceutical. Thank you.
You heard me say earlier that Henry Ford not only got all kinds of products out of hemp, he also got all kinds of products out of soybeans. And this story is true. I read about it in a biography of Mr. Ford. On one occasion, he summoned one of his executives and said, let's have lunch. We're going on a food drunk. And they went into the cafeteria, which was closed except for them. And Ford had a lot of dishes, and his associate had a lot of foods that Henry Ford didn't ordinarily eat, like roast pork and applesauce and all kinds of other goodies and pie and so on. And then Mr. Ford summoned another aide who brought in 2 bottles with each with the same liquid in it. And the liquid had been developed from soybeans by a pharmaceutical house. And the liquid was a laxative. Yep. It seems Mr. Ford didn't want to take the laxative alone, so he wanted somebody else to go through this experience with him. What the results were of the laxative, the book didn't say, and I didn't ask. Now, I've been reading some of the leaflets here that you've been putting out regarding jury nullification, or that this organization does. And I have some problems with this. First of all, the one here about controlling your body. It also says in here, among other things, that you can use jury nullification to decide to prevent people from telling you whether or not you should have a gun. Well, that's kind of a red-hot issue just now, considering all the gun violence that goes on, especially in minority neighborhoods, but elsewhere as well. And when you throw into this that in the late 19th century, I do not have, unfortunately, the exact case citation, there was a Supreme Court decision handed down at a time when the Chief Justice Morrison Waite was a conservative who had been appointed by President Grant. And the Supreme Court essentially said that the Second Amendment was put in there to give militias the right to carry guns, and it's not a question of arming individual citizens. So I have grave problems with this business of guns, and when you further throw into this that these leaflets have been put out by an organization headquartered in Helena, Montana, which has been the center of a lot of far-out right-wing groups, including all these unorganized militias created by government action, all these other groups like the Freemen and so on, who've been spouting around all kinds of right-wing hate messages and insisting that they have the right to revolution and to overthrow the government and all the rest of this stuff. You can understand, perhaps, why I considerably question what's in these leaflets here. Thank you.
Hi. I've been a fan and a supporter of NORML for a long time. It's a great outfit. They do excellent work. Basically, they're right. But I'm up here right now to add a little information about why I'm pessimistic. Alcohol prohibition did permanent damage to our country. Alcohol prohibition capitalized organized crime. Crime was not a major industry with major money behind it until alcohol prohibition. And we're probably never going to get rid of it. Alcohol prohibition ended at the bottom of the Great Depression, and the job description of prohibition agent suddenly ceased to exist. It was a hell of a time for your job to disappear. I mean, I don't mean just getting fired. I mean, what you do isn't there anymore. And some of the more gung-ho and sleazier alcohol prohibition people invented the anti-marijuana bandwagon as an employment program. The most notorious was a guy by the name of Harry Anslinger Jr., who in large part was responsible for baloney like reefer madness. And it worked. And they got anti-marijuana laws and jobs again. There's a statistic associated with the so-called war on drugs that I have been looking for years, and I've never seen it. Nobody seems to have gone out and done the research to add up the numbers. The war on drugs gives a whole lot of cops employment, gives a whole lot of judges employment, the lawyers, prosecutors and defenders both, the entire prison industrial complex, which is a whole empire of scandal and disgrace by itself. I estimate personally that the quote, war on drugs, unquote, may be close to 1 million jobs if you add everything up. That's incredible political momentum. We're talking about firing 1 million people, or half, 2/3 of a million, whatever, however many hundreds of thousands it is. They're not going to go easily, to say the least. If there really were, I mean, the tide is moving gradually, but if there were intense public pressure to decriminalize, to regulate marijuana roughly along the lines that alcohol is regulated. I don't want to split hairs right now. I mean, driving when you're not able to drive is a bad idea. The reason you're not able to drive is not what makes it a bad idea. If real regulation and decriminalization had momentum, there would be incredible pressure against it. And I'm really not sure how it would come out. This is not a personal preference. This is more along the lines of the way it looks to me.
Good evening. I definitely like the idea of decriminalization of marijuana and cannabis. I think that if the federal government were to decriminalize it and tax it, much like they do cigarettes, that people who use marijuana recreationally wouldn't mind paying $20 or $25 or even $30 for a pack of pre-rolled marijuana, the same as they'd buy a package of, say, Pall Mall cigarettes. However, within a very short time, this entire nation would be able to smoke our way out of the deficit, which would be good for the country. But it would be bad for people like Obama who want to tell us, we have a big deficit, we have to have tax increases, we've got to tax the rich, we've got to soak them, man, and that kind of nonsense, and they want to use that. And remember that Rahm Emanuel, what he said, that never waste a good catastrophe. In other words, their attitude is the Machiavellian thing of use whatever you can politically for your own purposes, without any real regard for the people, because it's become apparent that our leaders in government don't have any regard for us. They could give a shit less about the people. They will get up there and say they care about the people, but they don't. They just want to use us for their own ends. I think that ultimately the people are getting smarter and smarter, and thanks to things like the YouTube and all of those computer things and so forth, people are becoming very much aware. If you'll witness the things like the Arab Spring and all of that, the people have become wise to the bullshit, and so they're throwing it off. Unlike the philosophy of Karl Marx, that one day first you have to have capitalism, and then communism will overthrow capitalism, and everybody will be communist, and we'll all live happily ever after. On the contrary, I think that we will eventually overthrow the bastards in government, and that we'll have a system of permissiveness and a system of basically capitalism where people can live and do as they please as long as they don't hurt anybody, which is very much the libertarian philosophy. I think that those of us who really love freedom, what we really need to do and ought to do is to find ways to confuse our leaders in government and screw them up real good. Apply for as many Social Security cards under as many names as you possibly can. Do that with driver's licenses and with birth certificates and other forms of ID. You never know when you may need an alternative ID, just like when they had the Spanish Inquisitions. We're not too far away from things like that, because the more government gets control, the more they're going to want control, and the more they're going to harass our people. Another thing some of you may want to consider doing is buy the really big 55-gallon hefty garbage bags, and when you can, maybe attach them to hula hoops and throw them over the photo enforcement cameras. That's something that would go a long way to causing government locally not to be able to soak people for all kinds of money for running through red lights and that sort of thing. Another thing I'd like to say here, separate and apart, is that all the wonderful things that marijuana offers, or cannabis, or hemp, or whatever you want to call it, all the wonderful things that it offers, besides things like treating all kinds of diseases. And somebody here earlier asked about proof. I know that it was proven back in the 60s that it eliminated the effects of glaucoma, which is night blindness, which that in itself can save many, many lives for people who are unable to drive and so on and that. But one of the most wonderful aspects, I think, is that that you can derive plastics from hemp, which we can have cars with bodies that are made out of plastics, and we can have all kinds of things that are made out of plastics, which would be great. And don't be confused by the idea that if it's too cheap and too efficient and too good, that we're all going to not work and it's an argument against capitalism. That's an argument for capitalism. The cheaper things are in their raw materials, the better it is for everyone, including capitalism. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And to continue on that same line, what is the best way to get the hemp industry off the ground and working for, its complete and total rejuvenation? That is the way we've been doing it in the information technology industry for the last 20, 25, 30 years or so. And that, my friends, takes something called the venture capitalist and the formation of a corporation for a startup company. I can definitely see a number of startup farming operations in central Illinois to start hemp operations and grow cannabis. As a matter of fact, I can definitely see Wall Street getting involved with the influence of prospectuses in the buying of stock in the potential of hemp-producing companies. This might go a long way with all the benefits and it's being as cheap as it is. We never thought we'd see data and the amount of computational power as cheap as it is today because of the revolution in technology. We can also see the same thing happen with pot and the hemp industry and other types of things that move along there. So again, it's not just a matter of what happens, because the fuel behind capitalism is money. You have money, you buy something, a company provides it. If you don't want that something, you don't buy it, that company doesn't provide it, they go bankrupt. I don't see a better system I do not see a better system that can take that into account. Yes, supply and demand has a big bearing on the way we do business. And supply and demand should also have the same influence over how we make our laws. You need laws against fraud, you need laws against abuse of power, you need laws against monopolism, but as far as the rest, I think we can, as long as the deal's a deal, a handshake's a handshake, and businessmen honor their word through contractual law, I think capitalism's the best way to go about legalizing the hemp industry. And once we get some big guns behind it, we will see it. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, thanks a lot. Good to see you again. And thanks to your pals for showing up here. I covered a lot of ground here. Let's see what we can cover here. Marijuana, they say you got to be cautious about marijuana because it's going to lose you, make it difficult for you to think and be logical. What amazed me is that I listened to you guys giving rebuttals, which are completely illogical, and you haven't used marijuana at all. Do you really think we're on the brink of the Spanish Inquisition? I mean, come on, Dave. What do you Anyhow, I'm going to be eclectic here. I like reading about agriculture, and over the years, since a young man, I worked at a farm. Marijuana is a grass, if I'm correct, and this is certainly the right place for grasses. The tall grass areas are more in Ohio. Illinois is kind of the middle range, and the grasses obviously get shorter as you go further west, Kansas and eastern Colorado. So yes, certainly Illinois would be the ideal location for growing any sort of grass, which has a history of its own in terms of mankind's use of grasses. Probably the one type of plant that we've used more so than any other for various uses. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to read a couple here. I lived in Kansas, and I certainly will attest to the fact that marijuana grows at an incredible rate. It was not unusual to have plants as high as that partition in the middle of the room there. It grew as a weed, and I lived on dirt roads, and the county would have to come along and plow each side of the road because it would getting narrower because of marijuana. that was growing, and this just grew incredible. That's what I mean. In terms of those production figures and things like that of that study, I can certainly attest to that. It certainly grew and grew like a remarkable member of the plant kingdom. Regarding alcohol, I'm sorry, I totally support the prohibition, but I come across it from a labor perspective. And this is also ties into the marijuana in the sense that how many days are lost is the figure I use due to substances such as alcohol. And it's considerable. And I have researched this, and the number of days lost from marijuana is virtually non-existent. So there can little be an argument raised that it would have any effect upon lives or productivity or anything of that nature. But no, if you, there's certainly justification for prohibition. I can attest to that, having defended a lot of people with substance abuse. The other thing I knew about this, I volunteered at the Historical Society. You may not be aware of it, but in the making of clothing, in particular linen, the way the pioneers did it, in that thing they had three stages. You have to break the plant, and they would heckle it, and then there's a break, sketch, and heckles where you comb it, and you get the fibers in the middle of the plant. And that's exact. And then you spin that into string and weave it into cloth, and that's how you make linen. And the basic process is also in using wool, and I'm surprised to see that they do exactly the same processes for processing marijuana, which makes it identical to cloth. And I'm surprised it doesn't have a greater application for clothing, personally, looking at it. And the other thing I saw, the rope thing, actually all that naval rope was made in Boston, by the way. There's a museum there like that. Regarding the medical claims, I don't place any credibility to the claims of the alternative medicine regarding herbs. And Margaret's not here. It certainly is true. I've looked at the encyclopedia of herbs and things like that, and those lists of what one plant does is just beyond imagination. It's not unique to marijuana, and none of those are verifiable and have been tested and things like that. There are 80,000 herbs listed supposedly have medical uses, and that's just way beyond comprehension. Let's see, Leo. Also, if you legalize marijuana, I also was curious, what would you call the brands? Like Moon Glow or something, you know. That'd be pretty cool. Let's see. The jury nullification is dangerous nonsense. I'm sorry. Go roll up your sleeves and go through the legitimate judicial process or legislative process for enacting laws or changing laws. There's no quick method. There's nothing in our written body of laws, any procedures for this. It simply does not exist. There's no case law for it whatsoever. Is trying to influence the legislative body difficult? Hey, tell me about it. I've been trying to do it for 25 years. You win some, you lose some, but that's the thing we have. We elect people to go and to vote upon our laws. And if you aren't able to influence them, then go back home and rethink it and do it again. And try to get the people in there and present your arguments. And that's what citizenship is called. And there's no provision for any kind of silly libertarian stuff. I'm sorry, to circumvent the process, another check and balance on our system. There's no discussion of it historically like that. Last of all, though, red lights. I wish there were red lights on every street corner as a pedestrian. If you have no chance of surviving getting hit by a car over 5 miles per hour, none. And it's about time you people who drive got to realize that we have the right of way. And I hope if you want to go through a red light, you know what my fine? I'd fine you $5,000 because you're endangering my life. And if you got no place to go, but maybe the college or complex, you can be a little late, but you don't endanger my life in the process of doing so. That there's nothing that authorizes you do that, and no penalty. You're getting away lucky as far as I'm concerned at $5,000 for endangering the life of someone needlessly. But anyhow, thanks a lot. That was cool. You get one shot. All right. Yeah, he's anxious already.
I'm going to be a bit eclectic too, and I hope not too disorganized. But I think maybe we got to kind of short circuit drug laws in general. They're about to make them. Well, you know, I'm not one for passing a lot of laws, but actually I don't have anything against the driving under the influence laws. And I think maybe we ought to have committing crime under the influence laws. The theory of drug laws is that if you take drugs, you're going to commit crimes. Well, not everybody commits crimes, and I think we ought to just restrict it to cases where people commit crimes under the influence of a drug. You can't say any criminal suspect, you give them a drug test. And I think that'd save a lot of turmoil and expense and everything else that the drug law is causing. But as far as jury nullification is concerned, and these right-wing racists in the Northwest, I used to be pretty well acquainted with the right-wing tax resistance movement, which I think had a number of very valid grievances to the income tax.
Georgia versus Wellsburg. Georgia versus Wellsburg, right? Tell them about that.
Well, there's a bunch of them. Anyway, I think that's some legitimate grievances. Actually, the ones that and the people that I got acquainted with, there were some pretty bad racists, but that was a rather small portion of them. And I think a lot of it was just a kind of problem when you create a just grievance to begin with. But anyway, as far as being eclectic is concerned, I've advocated bringing back steam locomotives a number of times for high-speed freight trains. I think it'd be cheaper than diesel, but one of the problems is fuel. I'd like to see some kind of research and development into industrial hemp as a fuel for steam locomotives. One more brief comment in conjunction with Charlie's advocacy of a stoplight on every street corner. I agree, but I think they should be green all the time and in all directions, and you pedestrians will watch out.
You know, once the pot industry starts getting a little bit more growth in there, just imagine the marketing possibilities. You know, we can remember that eternal question, which is better, cents a million or Hawaiian?
I would like to very quickly rebut one of the rebuttals. There was a comment about people committing crimes while under the influence of drugs. Our speaker mentioned another excellent organization called LEAP, L-E-A-P, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And primarily, LEAP is retired officers, court judges, people who definitely know the facts on the ground, but they're retired, so they can't be retaliated against. And one of the big speakers for LEAP, I think the guy's name is Norman Stamper, is a retired chief of the City of Seattle Police Force, which is, I assume, a pretty serious position. And he's got a line, he says that when he talks to an audience of cops, he asks them 2 questions. First, when is the last time you had to fight somebody who was high on pot? Not pot in a 6-pack, not pot in a 5th of tequila, just pot alone. And everybody kind of looks and gets puzzled, and they realize that in however many years they've been on the force, it's never happened. Then he asks the cops, when's the last time you had to fight somebody who was drunk? And they look at their watches.
Yeah, it's business about militias.
We have the final rebuttal. Everybody's doing the...
There was a Supreme Court decision in the late 1870s. I haven't read it for years. It's called Presser versus Illinois. And this was against Union heads marching down the street as a militia. And I think it said they can't do it because they didn't meet the constitutional definition of a militia. And I think if we start meeting that definition, I think a lot of our gun control problems will go by the board.
I'd just like to say one more thing here. Somebody made fun of my likening the situation to an inquisition. But if you look at the number of people that are in prison over the marijuana situation, let alone any other drugs, how can you not call that an inquisition? And remember, the Inquisition pulled down the Spanish government.
No, that's not the Inquisition! Amongst the most elementary weapon of fear, surprise, ruthless efficiency, and the most fanatical devotion to the law!
My final comment is just going to be on the issue of jury nullification. And you brought up the point that it's kind of like a right-wing issue, and currently it is kind of being picked up by the right wing. What I think is important is that this is kind of the one crossover between the right and the left. There's not too much that we have in common that can really unify us on the same page, but I think that for lots of reasons, but the jury nullification issue, the reason why I brought it up is because it's really something that the right and the left have in common, and it can build unity amongst, like, hardly any, there's not too much else that really kind of crosses that line. But that being said, the jury nullification is not a right-wing issue, that this is something that really has a lot of historical precedent. And
one case.
No, well, first of all, it should be said the very first Supreme Court case, Justice John Jay on the Supreme Court instructed the jury that they have the right to look at the facts of the case as well as the law. And that's, you can read the records, but this was the historical precedent, was that up until about 80 years, the jurors would actually be informed that they have the right to look at the law itself. Now, why is this important? Is because the law hasn't always been right. There's been plenty of times. There's been plenty of times in our. I'll get to that.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of times in our history when the law has been wrong. Now, even before the country was founded, like the precedent of jury nullification actually gave us our free speech, our right to free speech in the United States. And this goes back to the case of the publisher. Lorenzo, can you help me out on this?
Peter Zenger.
Peter Zenger, who was, he was arrested because in his newspaper he printed some scathing remarks against the governor of the colony of New York. And at the time, he was arrested for printing seditious libel. In his defense, he said that everything he printed was true. But now at the time, the judge said that the truth is even worse because the truth is more dangerous, and it would be better for him to have printed a lie. So he went before the case, and once again, so this is the case where our government said, you know, you can't print this, and the jury argued a case of jury nullification, and that actually kind of secured our right to free speech in the United States, the freedom of the press. And then it goes back to the abolitionist movement. We have to remember that there was a point in our history where slavery was legal and the fugitive slave law was enforced, and it was through conscientious jurors and abolitionist jurors who stepped up and said, no, the law is wrong. I will not enforce this law. I'm not going to put in an innocent person behind bars. I'm not going to do that. So they did it out of compassion. So I'm going to say that this has not been a right-wing issue. This has been an issue of just civil rights activists throughout history stepping up and putting that check on government. And we could look at many situations like Rosa Parks on the bus. You know, there's been situations when the law itself has been wrong, and it's been the duty of juries to step up and use that power. And that's been also used during the civil rights movement, during prohibition of alcohol. And I think one argument that Charles was going to make was that in the South there's been cases of racism where jury nullification has worked to maybe get murderers off for crimes that were in fact committed.
One or two.
And that's been an unjust application. But the thing that's interesting about this is that statistics show that the jury is actually less racist and less prejudiced than the law enforcement itself, than the police department and the judges, which are predominantly made of white males. Having a jury of your peers that's selected from the public, you have a random group of people, and statistically they're going to be less racist than the body of law itself. So that kind of answers that argument. But I'd just like you to see that this issue of jury nullification, read the history of it. Right now the right wing is running with it, and I bring it up because it is a common ground between us, but it's not a right-wing issue, it's a civil rights issue. And it just goes to show that we have a right to put the check on government, and I think that we should use this power because there was historical legal precedent within the Supreme Court that was established. And currently in the state of Indiana, it's written in their constitution. There's 2 states that currently have jury nullification on the books in their own state constitution, Indiana being one of them. And I have literature that states that we're trying to get this out there and just revitalize the power of the jury through FIJA. It's the Fully Informed Jurors Association. But once again, I'm advocating for conscientious use of the jury for the purpose of, justice and protecting people, getting rid of victimless crimes and whatnot. And I think in that sense it can be justly applied. And I think it is a valuable tool because it's worked throughout history. It's like the one power that ordinary citizens have is, you don't know if your vote's going to count. You don't know if your politician's going to do what you tell them to do. But by serving on a jury, we can be the ultimate enforcer of the law. And ultimately our voice is heard. So that's why I'm advocating for it. And I encourage people to look at the history and see it as just a civil rights issue and not a right-wing issue. So. I think it's good.
All right, good one. Very good.